Imagine buying your terrifying billionaire boss a rubber dog bone for Christmas as a joke, only to watch him rip it to shreds with his bare hands, look you dead in the eye, and growl, "I prefer tasting you." That is exactly the mess Cleo has stepped into. She thought she was just snowed in with her grumpy boss and her terrified dog, but she is about to discover that the man in the suit is actually the Alpha King, and he has been waiting years to claim her. Welcome back to Lena's Romantasy Collection, your sanctuary for the most passionate and thrilling werewolf romances on the web. I am so happy to have you here for this spicy holiday special. Before we let the snowstorm trap these two together, I want to know, where are you watching from today? Drop your city or country in the comments. I love seeing how far our pack extends. If you are ready for some possessive alpha energy, please like this video, share it with a friend who needs a book boyfriend, and subscribe so you never miss a story. Now, let's get into it. Chapter 1: The Holiday Disaster. If there were a specific award for most chaotic Christmas Eve, Cleo was entirely certain she was currently the frontrunner to win it. "Barnaby, drop it! Immediately drop the reindeer!" Cleo shrieked, lunging across her small living room rug. Her golden retriever mix, usually a loving, dopey ball of fluff, had decided that the plastic dasher she'd purchased from the dollar store was his mortal enemy. Barnaby didn't drop it. Instead, he wagged his tail so enthusiastically that his entire rear end shook, chomped down harder on the reindeer's head, and zoomed into the kitchen, his paws skidding wildly on the linoleum. "I swear, you are the worst roommate I have ever had," Cleo groaned, pushing her messy bangs out of her eyes. She smelled of pine needles and stress, though her natural scent, a distinct, sweet, wild honeysuckle, still clung to her skin despite the holiday madness. She checked the clock on the wall. 6 p.m. Outside, the snow was already falling in thick, heavy sheets, painting the city of Chicago in a suffocating, silent white. She had planned a quiet evening, just her, the dog, a bottle of cheap Pinot Grigio, and a steadfast refusal to check her work emails. But fate, specifically in the form of her boss, had other plans. Her phone buzzed on the counter, lighting up the dim room. A text from Mr. Thorne. "I'm outside. Buzz me in. I need the Anderson file. You took the physical copy home." Cleo stared at the screen, her heart doing a traitorous little flip in her chest. Silas Thorne, the billionaire CEO of Thorne Enterprises, a man who built skyscrapers like other people built Lego sets. He was 6'4" of brooding silence and terrifying competence. He was also the most infuriatingly attractive man she had ever met. Not that she would ever admit it to him. She valued her job, and she certainly didn't want to be another cliché, the broke assistant chasing the billionaire's wallet. "Great," she muttered, marching to the intercom and hitting the buzzer. "Just great. Barnaby, if you embarrass me, I'm donating your toys to a cat." Barnaby ignored her, happily chewing on the plastic decapitated reindeer in the corner. A moment later, 3 heavy knocks rattled her front door. They were precise, authoritative strikes, the sound of a man who didn't ask for entry but expected it as his birthright. Cleo smoothed down her oversized Christmas sweater, took a deep, steadying breath, and opened the door. Silas Thorne filled the doorway, literally. His shoulders seemed to span the entire width of the frame, blocking out the hallway light. He was wearing a black wool coat that probably cost more than her car, the dark fabric dusted with fresh, glistening snow. His raven hair was damp, and his eyes, those strange, amber-flecked irises, locked onto hers instantly. "Cleo," he greeted, his voice a low rumble that vibrated deep in her chest. "Mr. Thorne," she replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I didn't realize you did your own courier work on Christmas Eve." "The roads are deteriorating. My driver is stuck in the loop. I was nearby." He lied smoothly. He wasn't nearby. He had driven 20 miles out of his way just to catch a scent of her. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, and the atmosphere in the tiny apartment shifted instantly. The air grew heavy, charged with static electricity that made the fine hairs on Cleo's arms stand up. And then, a miracle happened. Barnaby, who had been growling playfully at the fridge, froze. The dog turned, saw Silas, and his ears flattened against his skull. The tail wagging stopped dead. Without a single sound, the dog dropped the plastic reindeer, lowered his belly to the floor, and army crawled backward until he was fully concealed underneath Cleo's sagging sofa. Silas looked at the cowering dog, then back at Cleo, a faint, arrogant smirk touching his lips. "Well trained," he said.
He never does that. Usually he jumps on guests. He destroyed my landlord's scarf last week. He knows better than to jump on me, Silas said simply, closing the door behind him and locking out the biting cold.
Chapter 2. The Code Red. The file is in my bag. I'll just grab it and you can be on your way to whatever fancy gala you attend where people eat tiny food on crackers, Cleo said, backing toward her bedroom. She needed to get away from him. The apartment was too small. With Silas standing in the center of her living room, it felt like she was trapped in an elevator with a tiger. Silas offered no verbal reply. He just stood there, unbuttoning his coat. As he moved, the scent of the outdoors, crisp snow, cold wind, and something distinctly masculine, like cedar and leather, washed over her. But underneath that, she noticed him inhaling deeply. His nostrils flared slightly, taking in the air of her apartment. Wild honeycomb. It was everywhere here. To Silas, it was like walking into a warm bakery when you hadn't eaten in weeks. It was maddening. It made his wolf pace restlessly in the back of his mind, scratching at the cage of his control. Mine, the beast whispered, clawing at his ribs. She smells like ours. Here, Cleo said, returning with a blue folder. She held it out like a shield between them. Silas reached for it, his large hand brushing her fingers. The contact sent a jolt of heat zinging up her arm, straight to her heart. She pulled back as if burned. "Thanks," he murmured, his eyes lingering on her flushed face, darkening slightly. Suddenly, a loud, jarring beep screeched from Cleo's phone, followed by Silas's phone, and then the TV in the corner. Emergency alert, National Weather Service, code red blizzard warning. All roads closed. Shelter in place immediately. Do not attempt travel. Cleo blinked at her phone, the red letters searing into her vision. Shelter in place? Is this a joke? She rushed to the window and pulled back the curtains. The world outside had disappeared. It wasn't just snowing, it was a whiteout. The streetlights were barely visible, reduced to hazy orange orbs in a swirling vortex of white. A car parked across the street was already half buried. "It's not a joke," Silas said, his voice grim. He was looking at his phone, his brow furrowed. "The city has shut down the bridges. Plows have been pulled off the road until visibility improves." Cleo turned to him, panic rising in her throat. "Okay, but you have a giant SUV. It has four-wheel drive and tank treads or whatever rich people cars have. You can make it, right?" Silas looked at her, his amber eyes unreadable. "My car is engineered well, Cleo. It's not magic. If I go out there, I'll be stuck in a snowbank within 2 blocks." The silence that stretched between them was deafening. Barnaby let out a pathetic whimper from under the couch, voicing the exact feeling in Cleo's stomach. "So," Cleo started, her voice squeaking slightly, "you're stuck here." "It appears so," Silas said. He took off his heavy coat completely, revealing a charcoal suit that fit his muscular frame to perfection. He loosened his silk tie, looking entirely too comfortable in her humble space. "Mr. Thorne, I live in a 600-square-foot box. I have 1 bathroom. I have a fridge containing only Greek yogurt and leftover pizza. This isn't exactly the Ritz." "I don't need the Ritz," Silas said, walking to the window and staring out at the storm, his broad back to her. "And stop calling me Mr. Thorne. Since we're going to be roommates for the foreseeable future, call me Silas." "I can't call my boss Silas," she snapped, crossing her arms over her chest. "It's weird." He turned his head, looking over his shoulder. The intensity of his gaze pinned her to the spot. "Then get used to it, Cleo, because I'm not going anywhere." Chapter 3. Cabin Fever. By the morning of the second day, Cleo was ready to climb the walls. The snow hadn't stopped. If anything, the tempest had worsened. The wind howled against the brick building, rattling the window panes like a monster trying to get in. But the storm outside was nothing compared to the tension brewing inside. Silas Thorne was simply too big for her apartment. It wasn't just his physical size, though having to squeeze past his broad shoulders in the narrow hallway was doing terrible things to her blood pressure. It was his presence. He was dominant, silent, and watchful. He had spent the first night sleeping on her pull-out couch, which was far too short for him. His feet hung off the end, yet he hadn't complained once. He just woke up, made coffee using her cheap beans, which he somehow brewed better than she ever did, and sat at her tiny kitchen table working on his laptop. "You're hovering," Silas said, without looking up from his screen. Cleo froze. She had been pretending to wipe down the counter for the 10th time. "I am not hovering. I am cleaning. It's what people do when they don't have assistants to do it for them." Silas closed his laptop and leaned back in the creaky wooden chair. The wood groaned in protest under his weight. "Is that what you think? That I'm helpless without staff?" "I think you're used to a certain standard of living," Cleo retorted, throwing the rag into the sink with a wet slap. "Your sheets smell like you," Silas said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming rougher. "I slept fine." Cleo's face heated up instantly. Wild honeysuckle. She knew that was the soak she used for her laundry. "Well, good." "Where is the beast?" Silas asked, changing the subject before she could combust. "Barnaby?" Pointed to the living room. "He's currently trying to merge his molecules with the floorboards behind the TV stand. Seriously, what did you do to him? Did you glare him into submission?" "Animals have good instincts," Silas said darkly. "Sometimes they know when to be quiet." "He's terrified of you," accused Cleo, putting her hands on her hips. "He's usually the alpha of this house." Silas let out a short, harsh laugh. "Trust me, Cleo, that dog was never the alpha." The way he said alpha, with a capital A, with a strange weight behind the word, made Cleo pause. She shook her head. "Whatever. Look, if we're going to be stuck here another night, we need rules. Rule 1, you stop staring at me like a puzzle you're trying to solve." Silas stood up. He moved so quietly for a big man. In 2 strides, he was in her personal space in the kitchen. He leaned down, bracing his hands on the counter on either side of her, trapping her effectively. "And what if I like the puzzle?" he whispered. Cleo's breath hitched. She looked up into his eyes. They were mesmerizing, swirling with flecks of gold. "I don't date bosses, Silas. I don't do the whole rich guy flings thing. I work hard for my reputation." "Is that what you think this is?" He leaned closer, inhaling the scent at the crook of her neck. "A fling?" "I don't know what this is," she admitted, her voice trembling, "but I know you're dangerous." "You have no idea," he murmured. He looked like he was about to kiss her or maybe devour her whole, but then he pulled back, his jaw tight. He walked away toward the living room, leaving Cleo gripping the counter, her knees shaking. Chapter 4: The Breach. The attack happened on the evening of the 3rd day. The storm had finally broken, leaving behind a silent, frozen world. The city was still paralyzed, but the wind had died down. Cleo and Silas were sitting on the floor of the living room. The power had flickered out an hour ago, leaving them in the intimate, dim glow of candlelight. They were playing cards. Go fish, because it was the only deck Cleo possessed. "Got any threes?" Cleo asked softly. "Go fish," Silas said, but he wasn't looking at his cards. His head was cocked to the side, his body rigid as stone. "Silas?" Cleo asked, sensing the shift in his energy. "What is it?" "Quiet," he ordered. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a command so absolute that Cleo's mouth snapped shut instinctively. Silas stood up slowly. He moved to the window, peering through the crack in the curtains. His body was vibrating with tension. A low sound rumbled in his chest. It sounded almost like a growl, but that was impossible. "Get in the bathroom," Silas said, turning to her. His face was pale, his eyes wild. "Lock the door. Do not come out until I tell you." "What? Why? Is it a burglar?" Cleo scrambled to her feet, confusion warring with fear. Crash! The sound of glass shattering came from the kitchen window. The back door exploded inward with a deafening boom, splinters of wood flying across the hallway. "Go!" Silas roared, shoving Cleo toward the hallway. Before Cleo could scream, 3 men poured into the apartment.
But they didn't move like ordinary men. They moved with a terrifying, animalistic speed, hunched low, their eyes reflecting the candlelight with a sickly yellow glow. They were dressed in tattered, heavy coats, smelling of wet fur and rot. "Thorn," one of the intruders hissed, his voice garbled and unnatural. "We smelled you. No pack to protect you now." Cleo froze in the hallway, paralyzed by terror. Silas didn't run. He stepped between Cleo and the intruders. "You made a mistake coming here," Silas said, his voice dropping into something guttural and demonic. "This territory is mine." The first man lunged. He had a knife, but he swung it with unnatural force. Silas caught the man's wrist in midair. There was a sickening snap of bone. The intruder howled, a sound that was more wolf than human, and Silas threw him across the room. The man hit the wall so hard the plaster cracked. The other two attacked at once. "Silas!" Cleo screamed. Silas was a blur of violence. He didn't fight like a boxer. He fought like a predator. He grabbed one attacker by the throat and slammed him into the floor, the impact shaking the entire apartment building. He took a punch to the ribs that would have killed a normal man, but he barely flinched. He was fighting to keep them away from her. Every move was calculated to push them back toward the broken door. But he was holding back. Cleo could see the strain in his neck, the way his muscles bulged, ripping the seams of his expensive shirt. He was fighting the urge to do something more. One of the intruders pulled a crowbar and swung it at Silas's head. Silas ducked, but the metal clipped his shoulder, tearing skin. Blood, dark and rich, sprayed onto the floor. Silas roared. He grabbed the man by the lapels of his coat and headbutted him. The sound was like two stones cracking together. The man went limp. "Leave," Silas bellowed at the remaining attacker, his eyes glowing with an impossible amber light in the darkness. The last intruder looked at his fallen comrades, then at the monster standing before him. He turned and fled into the snowy night, dragging the other two broken bodies with him.
Chapter 5. The Chew Toy. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. The apartment was freezing, the cold air rushing in through the shattered kitchen window. Silas stood in the center of the living room, chest heaving. His shirt was in ribbons. Blood was streaming down his arm from the crowbar wound, dripping onto Cleo's rug. He was shaking, his hands clenched into fists so tight his knuckles were white. He was making a sound, a low, rhythmic grinding noise, like he was in physical pain. "Silas," Cleo whispered. She grabbed the first aid kit from under the sink and approached him slowly. Barnaby was still under the couch, whining in high-pitched terror. Silas didn't turn. "Stay back, Cleo. I'm not steady." "You're bleeding," she said, her voice shaking but determined. She wasn't going to leave him. He had just fought off 3 men for her. "Sit down, please." She guided him to the armchair. He collapsed into it, his head hanging low. His skin was burning hot to the touch, like he had a fever of 105. Cleo worked quickly, cleaning the wound on his shoulder. It was deep, but as she watched, the bleeding seemed to slow unnaturally fast. She wrapped it in gauze, her hands trembling. Silas was still vibrating. His jaw was locked tight, his teeth grinding together audibly. He looked like a man trying to hold back an explosion. The adrenaline, or whatever it was, wasn't leaving his system. He looked ready to bite through the furniture. "You need to calm down," Cleo said frantically. "Your blood pressure must be through the roof. You're going to give yourself a stroke." He looked up at her. His eyes were dilated, almost black. "I don't need a doctor, Cleo. I need—" He trailed off, a growl ripping from his throat. He looked at her neck, at the pulse fluttering there. He looked like he wanted to bite her. Cleo panicked. She needed to give him something to focus on, something to bite that wasn't her. Her eyes darted to the coffee table. There, sitting amidst the mess, was a small, beautifully wrapped box. The gift she had bought for Barnaby. The indestructible rubber bone, guaranteed for aggressive chewers. Without thinking, Cleo grabbed the box and shoved it into Silas's chest. "Here, take this."
Silas blinked, the red haze in his eyes clearing slightly for a second. He looked at the box, then at her. "What is this?" It's a stress reliever," she lied, her voice squeaky. "Just open it. You look like you need to destroy something, and I'd prefer it not be my furniture." Silas ripped the paper off with one swipe of his hand. He held up the thick, red rubber bone. It was heavy, designed for pit bulls and German shepherds. He stared at it. "A dog toy?" "It's industrial strength, for heavy chewers." Silas looked at the toy, and then a dark, dangerous amusement flooded his face. The tension didn't leave, but it shifted. It changed from violent to carnal. He held the rubber bone in one hand. With a casual flex of his bicep, he squeezed. The indestructible rubber groaned, stretched, and then snap. He tore the thick toy in half as if it were made of wet paper. Then he shredded the halves into quarters, dropping the rubber chunks onto the floor one by one. Cleo stared, her mouth open. That toy was supposed to last a lifetime. Silas leaned forward, the predator returning to his eyes. He reached out, grabbing Cleo by the waist and pulling her between his spread knees. The scent of wild honeysuckle calmed the wolf, but ignited the man. He lowered his head to her ear, his hot breath sending shivers down her spine. "I appreciate the gesture, Cleo, but I don't need a toy to chew on," he whispered, his voice rough with unhidden desire. "I prefer tasting you."
Chapter 6. The Taste of Danger. The air in the room was so thick with tension, it felt like a physical weight pressing against Cleo's chest. The shredded remains of the indestructible rubber bone lay scattered on the rug like casualties of war, but Cleo couldn't look at them. She couldn't look anywhere but at Silas. His declaration hung between them. "I prefer tasting you." It wasn't a pickup line. It wasn't a smooth CEO power move. It was a promise, a threat, a confession. "Silas," she breathed, her voice barely a whisper. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Logic told her to run. This man had just fought off 3 attackers with his bare hands and ripped industrial rubber apart. He was dangerous. But her body didn't want to run. It wanted to lean in. "Tell me to stop," Silas rasped, his hands tightening on her waist. His thumbs dug into her hips, possessive and heavy. His eyes were dark, swirling with that strange golden fire. "Tell me to leave, Cleo. Right now." Cleo faltered. She looked at his shoulder, where the blood had soaked through the gauze. "You're hurt." "I don't feel it," he growled. He lowered his head, his nose brushing the sensitive skin below her ear. He inhaled deeply, shuddering as the scent of wild honeysuckle flooded his system. It was sweeter than the blood on his hands, more addictive than oxygen. "You smell like peace, like home." He didn't wait for permission. He captured her lips. It wasn't a gentle kiss, it was a collision. It was the storm outside brought indoors. His mouth was hot, demanding, and starving. Cleo gasped, and he took advantage, his tongue sweeping into her mouth, tasting her just as he said he would. He tasted like scotch and copper, and pure, unadulterated power. Cleo's hands found their way into his hair, gripping the thick, dark strands. She melted against him, her earlier fear dissolving into a liquid heat that pooled low in her belly. For a moment, she forgot the broken window, the attackers, the blizzard. There was only Silas. He groaned, a low, vibrating sound that seemed to come from his chest. No, deeper than that. It rumbled against her own body. He lifted her easily, pressing her back against the wall, his hips grinding against hers. Crash. A loud, metallic clang echoed from the kitchen. Silas froze. He pulled back instantly, his head snapping toward the noise, his body shifting back into combat mode. Cleo blinked, dazed, her lips swollen and tingling. What was that? They both looked toward the kitchen. Barnaby, who had apparently decided the coast was clear, had knocked over a baking sheet while trying to lick the leftover pizza crusts off the counter. The dog looked at them, a slice of pepperoni stuck to his nose, and gave a tentative wag of his tail. The spell was broken. Silas let out a breath that sounded like a curse. He stepped back from Cleo, running a hand over his face. The predator receded, leaving behind the exhausted, wounded man.
"I'm sorry," he said, his voice rough. He wouldn't look at her. "The adrenaline, it makes me intense?" Cleo supplied, breathless, touching her lips. "Unstable," he corrected grimly. He looked at the shattered window where the snow was drifting in. "Pack a bag, Cleo." "What? Why?" "Because those men might come back, and I can't protect you here with a hole in the wall and a dog who thinks pizza is a food group. We're leaving."
Chapter 7. The Morning After. The drive through the city the next morning was surreal. The blizzard had finally stopped, leaving Chicago buried under 2 feet of pristine white snow. The roads were empty, save for the occasional snowplow. Cleo sat in the passenger seat of Silas's massive black SUV, which, as she had predicted, was more tank than car. Barnaby was in the backseat, drooling on the leather upholstery. He seemed to have recovered his spirits now that they were out of the apartment, though he still refused to make eye contact with Silas. Cleo glanced at Silas's shoulder. He was wearing a fresh shirt he had retrieved from his car's emergency kit. "How is the wound?" she asked softly. "You lost a lot of blood last night." Silas gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. "It's fine, just a scratch." "A scratch? Silas, that guy hit you with a crowbar. I saw bone." "You saw what you were afraid to see," he lied smoothly. "It was just a deep bruise and a cut." Cleo narrowed her eyes. She wasn't stupid. She had cleaned the wound herself. It had been gaping. But this morning, when he changed his dressing, she had caught a glimpse of pink knit skin. It looked like a wound that was weeks old, not hours. "You heal fast," she noted, testing the waters. "Good genetics," Silas said, his tone final. He clearly didn't want to talk about it. "And regarding last night, the men, the ones who tried to kill us? They weren't after you," Silas said, his jaw tightening. "They were corporate espionage agents, hired by a rival firm. Thorn Enterprises is about to launch a merger. People get desperate." "Corporate agents?" Cleo scoffed. "Silas, they looked like Vikings who hadn't bathed in a month. One of them growled at me." "Mercenaries come in all shapes," Silas said, turning onto Lakeshore Drive. "The point is, you are a target because of your proximity to me. Until I sort this out, you are staying at my penthouse. It's a fortress. No one gets in without my biometric clearance." "And Barnaby?" "The beast comes too," Silas sighed. "Though if he chews my Italian leather sofa, I'm turning him into a rug." "He's a good boy," Cleo defended automatically. "He's a menace," Silas countered, though there was no real heat in his voice. He glanced at her, his expression softening. "I'm sorry, Cleo. I dragged you into my mess." "You didn't drag me," she said, looking out the window at the frozen lake. "You did," he murmured, almost to himself. "And now I can't seem to let you walk back out." The scent of wild honeysuckle filled the confined space of the car, warming the cold air. Silas's wolf purred in contentment. She was safe. She was with him. Now he just had to figure out how to keep her without scaring her away with the truth. Chapter 8. The Penthouse Fortress. Silas's penthouse wasn't an apartment. It was a kingdom in the sky. The private elevator opened directly into a living space that was larger than Cleo's entire building. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the snow-covered city and the icy vastness of Lake Michigan. Everything was sleek, modern, and intimidatingly expensive. Dark wood, black marble, and steel. It was beautiful, but it was cold. It lacked life. "Welcome home," Silas said, dropping her battered duffel bag onto the marble floor. "Home for now," Cleo corrected, stepping out of the elevator cautiously. Barnaby trotted out beside her, his claws clicking loudly on the expensive stone. He sniffed the air, sneezed, and immediately went to lift his leg on a potted plant that looked like it cost more than Cleo's car. "Barnaby, no!" Cleo shrieked, diving for the dog. She caught him just in time, wrestling the confused golden retriever away from the greenery. "Sorry, I'm so sorry, he's adjusting." Silas watched them, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. It was the first time she had seen him look genuinely amused since the attack. "The guest suite is down the hall to the right. The master suite, my room, is to the left. The kitchen is fully stocked." "This place is—" Cleo stood up, brushing dog hair off her jeans. "It's huge, Silas. Do you live here alone?"
Mostly, he said. He walked over to the wet bar and poured himself a glass of water. I value my privacy. It's lonely, Cleo blurted out before she could stop herself. Silas paused, the glass halfway to his mouth. He looked at her, his gaze intense. Your scent, he said. Wild honeysuckle? It's already changing the room. It makes the cold tolerable. Cleo felt a blush creep up her neck. It's just body wash, Silas. You can buy it at the drugstore for $5.99. No, he shook his head, his voice dropping to that husky register that made her knees weak. It's not just the soap. It's you. It's your chemistry. It's intoxicating. He reached out, his hand hovering near her cheek, but he pulled back at the last second. He was holding back. Cleo could see the restraint in the tightness of his jaw, the way his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Why do you look at me like that? Like you're hungry? Because I am, he admitted darkly. Go unpack, Cleo, before I forget that I'm supposed to be a gentleman. He turned and strode toward his office, slamming the heavy oak door behind him. Cleo stood in the massive room, her heart racing, wondering exactly what she had gotten herself into.
Chapter 9. The Unwanted Guest. 2 days passed in the penthouse. It was a strange, domestic bubble. Silas worked from his home office, barking orders into his phone and managing the crisis of the attempted kidnapping, his cover story. Cleo worked remotely, answering emails and trying to keep Barnaby from eating Silas's silk rugs. On the third afternoon, the elevator chimed. Cleo looked up from her laptop on the kitchen island. She wasn't expecting anyone. Silas was in a video conference in his office. The doors slid open, and a woman stepped out. She was stunning, tall, with sleek platinum blonde hair, wearing a white power suit that fit her like a second skin. She carried herself with an air of absolute authority. She stopped when she saw Cleo. Her blue eyes narrowed, scanning Cleo from head to toe. Then she did something strange. She tilted her head back and sniffed the air, her nose wrinkling in distaste. "Who are you?" the woman demanded. Her voice was ice cold. "I'm Cleo," she replied, standing up and straightening her spine. "Mr. Thorne's executive assistant. Who are you?" "I'm Sloane," the woman said, stepping further into the room. "I'm on the board of directors and a close family friend of Silas." Sloane walked around the island, her heels clicking aggressively. She looked at the dog bed in the corner, then back at Cleo. "I didn't realize Silas was running a kennel. It smells like cheap flowers in here." Cleo bristled. "It's honeysuckle, and Barnaby is a guest, just like me." "A guest?" Sloane laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. "Is that what he told you? Silas doesn't have guests, sweetie. He has liabilities, and right now you look like a very big liability." Sloane leaned in, her voice dropping. "You don't belong here. You have no idea what kind of world you're standing in. You're a prey animal playing house in a lion's den." "Actually," Cleo said, her wit kicking in despite her nerves, "technically, wolves are canines, not felines, so the lion metaphor doesn't really work." Sloane's eyes widened, her pupils dilating into vertical slits for a split second. "What did you say?" "Sloane." Silas's voice cracked through the room like a whip. They both turned. Silas was standing in the doorway of his office. He looked furious. The air around him seemed to darken. "Silas," Sloane purred, her demeanor changing instantly to something sultry. "I was just meeting your hire." "You weren't invited," Silas said, walking toward them. He didn't look at Sloane. He looked straight at Cleo, checking her for damage. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Cleo said, crossing her arms. She was just leaving. Silas turned to Sloane. "You hurt her. Get out." "Silas, the elders are worried," Sloane hissed, dropping the act. "You're harboring a human during a crisis. If the rogues come back—" "If they come back, I will kill them," Silas snarled, stepping between Cleo and Sloane. "She is under my protection. If you speak to her with disrespect again, I will forget your father's rank and throw you off this balcony myself." Sloane flinched. She looked at Silas, then at Cleo, realizing she had lost. "Fine, but don't say I didn't warn you. The pack won't like this."
She spun on her heel and marched to the elevator. As the doors closed, Silas let out a long, ragged breath. Pack? Cleo asked, her eyebrow raised. Elders. What is this, a cult? Silas turned to her, his expression weary. Something like that.
Chapter 10. The Fever. That night, things got weird. Silas didn't come out for dinner. He had locked himself in his master's suite around 6 p.m. and hadn't made a sound since. Cleo sat on the sofa with Barnaby, trying to watch a movie, but she couldn't focus. The apartment felt charged. The air was heavy and hot, even though the thermostat was set to 70. "Silas?" she called out, walking to his bedroom door. "I ordered Thai food. You haven't eaten all day." No answer, but she could hear something. Heavy breathing, pacing. "Silas, I'm coming in," she warned. She tried the handle. Locked, of course. "Silas," she banged on the door, "if you passed out from blood loss, I swear to God I will kick this door down. Or, well, I'll call the doorman to kick it down." "Go away, Cleo." Silas's voice came from the other side. It sounded strained, guttural. "Stay away from the door." "Are you sick?" Cleo pressed her ear to the wood. "Open up." "I said leave," he roared. Something heavy smashed against the wall inside the room. Cleo flinched, but her stubbornness took over. "No, you're hurt and you're acting crazy." She remembered the spare key card Silas had given her for emergencies. She ran to her purse, grabbed it, and swiped it over the lock. The mechanism clicked. She pushed the door open. The room was pitch black, the blackout curtains drawn tight. It was sweltering hot inside, smelling strongly of sweat, musk, and that cedar forest scent that was uniquely Silas, only magnified by 1,000. Silas was huddled in the corner of the room, shirtless. His skin was glistening with sweat. His eyes were glowing in the darkness, actually glowing. "I told you not to come in," he groaned, shielding his eyes as the light from the hallway spilled in. "Oh my God, you're burning up," Cleo gasped, rushing to him. She ignored his growl and placed her hand on his forehead. It was scalding. "You have an infection. It's the wound. We need a hospital." "No hospital." Silas grabbed her wrist. His grip was iron tight, but his hand was trembling. "It's not an infection." He looked up at her, and the raw hunger in his face terrified her. It wasn't just pain, it was need. "It's you," he whispered, pulling her down to his chest, right over his heart, which was beating at a frantic, impossible rhythm. "God, Cleo, you have no idea how hard it is not to claim you." "Claim me?" Cleo's voice shook. "Silas, you're delirious." "I'm not delirious," he growled against her skin, his teeth grazing her pulse point. "I'm an alpha, and you are mine." Chapter 11. The Closed Door. Cleo's heart hammered against her ribs like a bird trapped in a cage. Silas was on top of her, his weight heavy and comforting, but his energy was terrifying. His skin was burning, his eyes glowing, actually glowing, with an amber luminescence that defied biology. "Silas," she whispered, her hands pushing against his bare, sweat-slicked chest. "You are not making sense. Let me call a doctor." "No doctors," Silas roared, the sound vibrating through her very bones. Suddenly, he wrenched himself away from her. It looked like it physically pained him to do it. He rolled off, crashing into the nightstand and knocking over a lamp. He scrambled backward, putting distance between them, his chest heaving. "Get out," he rasped, his voice sounding like gravel grinding together. "Cleo, if you don't leave this room right now, I cannot promise I won't hurt you." "You would never hurt me," Cleo said, her voice shaking but stubborn. She sat up, adjusting her shirt. "You're sick. You're having hallucinations." "I am not hallucinating." He stood up, turning his back to her. His muscles were rippling, spasmodic jerks traveling down his spine. He gripped the edge of his dresser so hard the wood splintered under his fingers. I am losing control. The scent, your scent, it's too much." "My scent?" Cleo stood up, feeling helpless. "Silas, it's just soap."
"It's not just soap," he bellowed, spinning around. His face was contorted, his canines looking longer, sharper than normal. "It's you. It calls to the beast. Go." The look in his eyes, predatory, starving, and desperate, finally broke through her stubbornness. This wasn't just a fever. This was something primal. "Okay," she whispered, back in toward the door. "Okay, I'm going, but I'm locking you in here for your own good." "Do it," he growled, "and don't open it, no matter what you hear." Cleo fled into the hallway, slamming the heavy door shut. She didn't lock it, but she slumped against the opposite wall, sliding down to the floor. Inside the room, a sound erupted that froze her blood. It wasn't a scream, it was a howl. A long, mournful, guttural sound that belonged in a forest, not a penthouse in downtown Chicago. Then came the sound of furniture breaking, heavy thuds, the ripping of fabric, the shattering of glass. Barnaby trotted down the hallway, his ears perked up. He looked at the door, then at Cleo. He didn't whine. He just sat down next to her, leaned his heavy weight against her side, and let out a long sigh. "I know, buddy," Cleo whispered, burying her face in the dog's fur. "I think he's lost his mind, and I think I'm crazy because even though he looked like a monster, I didn't want to leave."
Chapter 12. The Claw Marks. The sun rose over a frozen, glittering Chicago, but the penthouse felt like a crypt. Cleo hadn't slept. She had spent the night curled up on the sofa with Barnaby, listening to the destruction in the master suite. The noises had stopped around 4 a.m. Now, at 8 a.m., the door to the master suite opened. Cleo stood up instantly, spilling her cold coffee. Silas stepped out. He looked wrecked. He was wearing fresh clothes, dark jeans and a gray sweater, but he looked exhausted. His hair was damp, as if he'd just showered. There were dark circles under his eyes. "Silas?" Cleo asked softly. He flinched. He wouldn't look at her directly. "Good morning." "Good morning? That's it?" Cleo marched over to him. "Silas, last night you sounded like you were exorcising a demon. You destroyed your room. You growled at me." "I had a fever," he said, his voice flat. "It broke." "A fever doesn't make you howl," Cleo argued, "and it doesn't make your eyes glow." "Trick of the light," he lied, walking past her toward the kitchen. "I have a condition. It's rare. It causes episodes of extreme aggression and disorientation. I forgot to take my medication. It won't happen again." Cleo stared at his broad back. It was the worst lie she had ever heard. "A condition? Is the condition called lycanthropy?" she joked, trying to lighten the mood. Silas froze. The glass coffee pot in his hand rattled against the counter. He turned slowly. "Why would you say that?" "It's a joke, Silas," Cleo said, unnerved by his intensity, "because you acted like a wolf, and you shredded a chew toy yesterday." He relaxed, but only slightly. "Right, a joke." He poured coffee, his hands steady now. "I have an event tonight, the Thorn Enterprises Christmas Gala. It's mandatory for the CEO." "You're in no condition to go to a party," Cleo scoffed. "You look like you fought a bear." "I need to go," Silas said firmly, "and I need you to come with me." "Me? As what? Your assistant?" "No." Silas turned to her, his amber eyes burning. "As my date. If the corporate spies are watching, I need you close where I can protect you. I can't protect you if you're here alone, and I'm across town." "So I'm a human shield?" Cleo crossed her arms. "No." Silas stepped closer, the magnetic pole between them snapping back into place. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her neck. Barnaby, who had been watching from the sofa, suddenly let out a soft woof. He trotted over to Silas and, for the first time ever, nudged Silas's hand with his wet nose. Silas looked down at the dog in shock. "Looks like the beast approves." Cleo smiled weakly. "Okay, I'll go. But if you start growling at the waiters, we are leaving." Chapter 13. The Scent of Claiming. The dress arrived at noon, It was a courier delivery, clearly ordered by Silas's people. It was a floor-length gown of emerald green velvet with a slit up the thigh and a neckline that was tasteful but daring. It was the most beautiful thing Cleo had ever touched. "I can't wear this," Cleo told Silas, who was in the living room reading emails. "This costs more than my college tuition. I'll feel like an imposter." "You'll look like a queen," Silas said without looking up. "Wear it." By 7 p.m., Cleo was ready. She walked into the living room and Silas stopped breathing. He stood up slowly, his eyes raking over her body. The velvet hugged her curves, and the deep green made her pale skin glow. "Well?" she asked, spinning around. "Do I pass inspection?" Silas didn't speak. He crossed the room in 3 long strides. He stopped in front of her, his hands hovering over her shoulders. "You are—" He struggled for words. "Breathtaking." He leaned in, inhaling deeply near her neck. "But you're missing something." "Jewelry?" Cleo asked. "No," Silas murmured. "This." He took his own wrists, he had rubbed them against the scent glands on his neck earlier, though Cleo didn't know that, and pressed them gently against the pulse points on her neck. He then ran his hands down her arms, resting them on her waist. To Cleo, it felt like a warm, possessive hug. To any wolf at the gala, Silas had just doused her in his pheromones. He was marking her, "Do not touch, property of the Alpha King." "There," he whispered, his voice rough. "Now you're ready." "What did you do?" Cleo laughed nervously, feeling flushed. "You just rubbed your wrists on me." "Old superstition," Silas said, his eyes twinkling with a secret. "For luck, and to keep the wolves at bay." "Metaphorical wolves, right?" "Let's hope so," Silas grimaced. He offered her his arm. "Shall we?" Barnaby watched them leave from his spot on the rug, chewing happily on one of Silas's expensive Italian leather loafers. Silas saw it, sighed, and decided to let the dog live. Chapter 14. The Gala. The gala was held at the Grand Hall of the Drake Hotel. It was an ocean of tuxedos, sequins, and expensive champagne. As soon as Silas and Cleo walked in, the room went silent. Cleo felt the weight of 100 pairs of eyes. She assumed it was because she was on the arm of the city's most eligible billionaire. She didn't notice that the people staring the hardest were the ones sniffing the air subtly. "Stick to me," Silas murmured, his hand tightening on her waist. "Do not leave my side." "I wasn't planning on it," Cleo whispered back. "These people look like they bite." "Some do," Silas muttered. They moved through the crowd. Silas was stiff, his head on a swivel. Every man who looked at Cleo got a glare from Silas that could curdle milk. "Silas, relax," Cleo hissed. "You're crushing the champagne flute." "They're staring," Silas growled. "They're staring because you look like you're about to murder someone," she corrected. Suddenly, a man approached them. He was tall, with slicked-back hair and a smile that didn't reach his cold eyes. "Silas," the man said smoothly, "I didn't think you'd show. Rumor has it you've been indisposed." Silas stiffened. "Vane, what are you doing here?" "I'm a shareholder," Vane smiled, showing too many teeth. He turned his gaze to Cleo. He leaned in, sniffing blatantly. "And who is this? My God, Silas, is this her, the wild honeysuckle?" Cleo blinked. "Excuse me?" Vane reached for Cleo's hand. "A pleasure, my dear. You smell delicious." Before Vane's fingers could graze Cleo's skin, Silas moved. He slapped Vane's hand away with a force that echoed through the small circle of bystanders. "Touch her." Silas dropped his voice to a subsonic growl that vibrated the floorboards. "And I will remove your hand from your body, Vane. Here, in front of the mayor." Vane recoiled, clutching his hand. He laughed nervously, but there was fear in his eyes. "Touchy, touchy, just looking, King." "Go," Silas ordered. Vane disappeared into the crowd. Cleo stared at Silas. "Silas, you just assaulted a shareholder." "He isn't a shareholder," Silas said, grabbing her hand. "He's a scavenger. Come on, dance with me." "I don't want to dance. I want answers." "Dance first." Silas pulled her onto the floor. He pulled her flush against his body, much closer than was appropriate for a waltz. His chin rested on her head. "I'm sorry," he whispered into her hair.
I'm possessive. It's a flaw. A flaw? Cleo looked up at him, melting despite her anger. Silas, you practically threatened to dismember him. I meant it, Silas said, his eyes locking on hers. No one touches you, Cleo. No one but me. The music swelled. Cleo felt the heat of his body seeping into hers through the velvet. She felt safe, protected, and incredibly desired. For a moment, the world faded away. Chapter 15. The Ambush. The magic lasted until they reached the valet stand outside. The cold air hit them, a stark contrast to the warmth of the ballroom. The snow had stopped, but the streets were icy. Wait here, Silas said, handing his ticket to the valet. I'll get the car warm. I'm fine, Cleo shivered, wrapping her coat tighter. Suddenly, the shadows in the alleyway next to the hotel moved. It wasn't just 1 or 2 men this time, it was 5. They emerged silently, circling Silas and Cleo. They weren't wearing masks, they were smiling. Vane sends his regards, the leader said. He was holding a gun. Cleo gasped. Silas! Silas didn't panic. He stepped in front of Cleo, shielding her body with his. Get behind the pillar, he ordered calmly. They have guns, Cleo screamed. I know. Run, Cleo, now. Bang. The gunshot echoed like a cannon blast. Cleo screamed, squeezing her eyes shut. But Silas didn't fall. She opened her eyes. Silas was standing there, his hand raised. He had caught it? No, that was impossible, but the bullet wasn't in his chest. The attackers dropped their guns. Their bodies began to contort. The cracking of bones filled the alleyway, a sickening, wet sound. Their spines elongated, their jaws snapped forward, their clothes ripping apart. Cleo watched in horror as the 5 men transformed into 5 massive, snarling wolves. Oh my God, she whispered, backing away until she hit the brick wall. Oh my God. The alpha wolf lunged at Silas. Silas, look out, she shrieked. Silas didn't run. He looked at Cleo, a look of profound apology in his eyes. Forgive me, he said. And then Silas Thorne, the billionaire CEO, exploded. His suit shredded as his body expanded. Fur, black as midnight, burst from his skin. He grew 2 feet in height. His roar shook the glass of the hotel windows. In seconds, where Silas had stood, there was now a monster, a wolf, but not just a wolf. He was huge, easily twice the size of the attackers. He was a beast of shadow and muscle, with burning amber eyes. The Alpha King. He launched himself at the attacking pack, his jaws snapping around the leader's throat. Cleo slid down the wall, her hands covering her mouth, her mind struggling to comprehend what she was seeing. Her boss wasn't sick, he wasn't eccentric, he wasn't a criminal. He was a monster, and she had bought him a chew toy. Chapter 16. The Monster in the Suit. Cleo couldn't breathe. The cold Chicago air burned her lungs, but her brain refused to process the scene unfolding in the alleyway. Seconds ago, she had been standing next to her boss. Now, she was staring at a creature from a nightmare. Silas, or the massive midnight black wolf that used to be Silas, was a blur of violence. He was easily double the size of the other wolves, his shoulders broad and rippling with terrifying power. When he moved, the ground shook. One of the rogue wolves, a mottled gray beast, lunged for Cleo. Silas intercepted him in midair. With a roar that shattered the remaining windows of the alleyway, Silas clamped his jaws around the attacker's midsection. He didn't just bite, he crushed. He shook the gray wolf like a rag doll, or like a chew toy, and tossed him 30 feet into a dumpster. The remaining 3 wolves hesitated. They looked at their fallen leader, then at the towering black beast snarling saliva and fury, his amber eyes glowing like demonic coals. They whined. It was a pathetic, high-pitched sound of submission. Tails tucked, they turned and scrambled over the icy fence, fleeing into the night. Silence descended. Heavy, panting, terrifying silence. Cleo was pressed flat against the brick wall, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might bruise her ribs.
She was alone with the monster. Slowly, the massive black wolf turned its head. It looked at her. Cleo stopped breathing entirely. The wolf was covered in blood, not his own. Its teeth were bared, long and curved like daggers. It took a step toward her. "Stay back," Cleo whispered, her voice trembling. She held out a hand, a ridiculous, instinctual gesture. Good boy?" The wolf paused. It blinked. The glowing amber fire in its eyes dimmed slightly, revealing a familiar, intelligent golden hue. It chuffed, a soft, apologetic sound deep in its throat, and lowered its massive head. It wasn't attacking, it was bowing. Cleo stared into those eyes. She knew them. She had looked into them across a desk for 2 years. She had looked into them last night when he shredded a rubber bone. "Silas?" she breathed. The wolf nodded. Actually nodded. Then he jerked his head toward the end of the alley, indicating the car. He moved behind a large industrial dumpster, out of sight. A moment later, there was the sickening sound of bones cracking and reshaping, followed by a groan of human pain. "Cleo," Silas's voice called out from the shadows. It was hoarse, wrecked. "Get in the car, now."
Chapter 17. The HR Violation. The drive back to the penthouse was accomplished in a silence so loud it practically screamed. Silas drove one-handed. He had found a spare trench coat in the trunk to cover his nudity, as his tuxedo had been obliterated during the shift. He looked disheveled, wild, and utterly exhausted. Cleo sat in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead. Her mind was a kaleidoscope of impossible images. Werewolves. My boss is a werewolf. I bought a werewolf a dog toy. I tried to feed a werewolf a milk bone once. When they arrived at the penthouse, Silas didn't wait for the valet. He parked the car himself in the private garage and hustled Cleo into the elevator. As the doors closed, sealing them in the safety of the tower, Cleo finally exploded. "You're a wolf," she stated flatly. Silas leaned his head against the metal wall, closing his eyes. "Yes." "Like a full moon, silver bullet, howling at the moon wolf?" "The full moon is a myth," Silas muttered tiredly. "Silver just burns, it doesn't kill us instantly. And I only howl when I'm distressed." "Distressed," Cleo repeated hysterically. "You howled last night because I locked you in your room." "I was in pain," he defended weakly. The elevator doors opened. They stepped into the living room. Barnaby was waiting for them. The dog took one look at Silas, who smelled intensely of wolf and blood, and immediately army-crawled under the sofa, whimpering. "See?" Cleo pointed at the dog. "He knew. Barnaby knew the whole time. That's why he was terrified of you." "He's a prey animal with survival instincts," Silas grunted, walking to the bar and pouring a glass of amber liquid. His hand shook slightly. "I am the Alpha King," Silas corrected, downing the drink. He turned to face her, the trench coat gaping slightly to reveal his sculpted, scarred chest. "I ruled the Midwest Pack. Thorn Enterprises is a front, a way to integrate our kind into the modern world. And the chew toy?" Cleo felt a bubble of laughter rising in her throat. It was shock, she knew, but she couldn't stop it. "I gave you a rubber bone, Silas. I told you it was for aggressive chewers. Oh my God, I literally insulted a werewolf king with a squeaky toy." Silas's lips quirked. The ghost of a smile appeared. It didn't squeak, and honestly, the texture was satisfying. Cleo stared at him. Then she started laughing. She laughed until she was crying, sliding down the kitchen cabinets to sit on the floor. "I'm going to get fired, or eaten. This is definitely an HR violation." Silas walked over and crouched down in front of her. The humor vanished from his eyes, replaced by that intense, burning focus. "You're not going to be eaten, Cleo, and you're certainly not getting fired." He reached out, his hand hovering near her cheek. "You're the only reason I'm still sane." Chapter 18. The Mate Bond. "Why me?" Cleo asked, her laughter fading into sniffles. She looked at Silas, really looked at him. He was a monster, yes, but he was also the man who had protected her, the man who made her coffee, the man who saved her life tonight.
Why am I a target, Silas? Vane called me the wild honeysuckle. He acted like I was a drug. Silas sighed, sitting on the floor beside her. He rested his head back against the cabinets, staring at the ceiling. Werewolves have mates, he began, the word feeling heavy in the air. It's rare. Most wolves never find theirs. It's a biological imperative, a soul connection. Cleo's heart skipped a beat. Okay. When a wolf finds his mate, his senses lock onto her. Her scent becomes the center of his universe. It calms the beast, but it also drives the man insane with the need to claim, to protect, to possess. He turned his head slowly to look at her. Your scent, Cleo. Wild honeysuckle. It's not just pleasant. To me, it smells like survival. It smells like the other half of my soul. Cleo swallowed hard. So, I'm your mate? Yes, Silas whispered. I've known since the moment I hired you 2 years ago. I walked into the interview room, smelled you, and my wolf started clawing at my ribs, demanding I take you right there on the conference table. Cleo's eyes widened. 2 years? You've known for 2 years and you never said anything? I couldn't, Silas said, pain etching his features. Vane, the man at the party, is a challenger. He wants my territory. If he knew I had a mate, he would use you to get to me. He would hurt you to break me. That's why he sniffed me, Cleo realized, a shiver running down her spine. He was checking. And he confirmed it, Silas growled, a low rumble in his chest. That's why he attacked tonight. He knows that if he kills me, he can claim my territory. And if he takes you... Silas didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The look of pure, murderous rage that crossed his face told her everything. So I'm a liability, Cleo whispered. No. Silas grabbed her hand, interlacing his fingers with hers. His grip was desperate. You are not a liability. You are my queen, and I will burn this entire city to the ground before I let anyone touch a hair on your head. The conviction in his voice hit her like a physical wave. He meant it. This man, this powerful, terrifying creature, worshipped her. I'm not a queen, Silas. I'm just an assistant who has a dog named Barnaby and likes cheap wine. You are everything, he corrected. But now you know the truth. You can leave. I can set you up in a safe house in Europe. You never have to see me again. He looked like the words were tearing his throat apart. Cleo looked at their joined hands. She thought about the way he looked at her. She thought about the fear she felt in the alley, not for herself, but for him. I'm not going to Europe, she said. Chapter 19. The Fever Breaks. The moment Cleo said she wasn't leaving, something in the air shifted. The relief on Silas's face was instantaneous, but it was quickly replaced by something else. His pupils dilated until his eyes were almost black. His skin flushed. The scent of cedar and rain that poured off him intensified, becoming thick and heady. He let go of her hand as if she burned him and scrambled to his feet. Silas? Cleo asked, sensing the change. You need to go to your room, he rasped, backing away. He clutched the edge of the granite island, his knuckles turning white. Lock the door. Not this again, Cleo stood up. Silas, stop pushing me away. You don't understand, he groaned, doubling over. The fight, the transformation, it accelerated the rut. My control is gone, Cleo. Being this close to you, knowing you accept me, my wolf thinks it's time. Time for what? To claim, he roared. He looked at her, and the hunger in his expression was raw, terrifying, and undeniably arousing. If you stay here, I won't be able to stop. I will take you, and I won't be gentle. Cleo's breath hitched. She should be scared. A rational person would be scared, but she wasn't rational anymore. She was filled with the same intoxicating heat that radiated from him. She took a step toward him. Cleo, don't, he warned, a growl ripping from his throat. You are dangerous. You keep saying that, she whispered, taking another step. She was close enough to touch him now. She could feel the heat radiating off his bare chest beneath the open coat. I'm not afraid of you, Silas. Silas shuddered at her touch. A groan of pure agony tore from his lips. "Cleo, please, I don't want to force you." "You're not forcing me," she said, looking up into his burning eyes. "I'm choosing you." She stood on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his jaw. That was the spark that lit the powder keg. Silas snarled, a sound of pure possession. He grabbed her waist, lifting her off the ground effortlessly, and slammed her back against the kitchen island. It wasn't violent, it was desperate. "Are you sure?" he demanded, his voice a rough rasp against her lips. "Once I start, I can't stop. You will be mine, in every way, forever." "I'm sure," Cleo breathed. "Show me, Alpha." Chapter 20. Surrender. The word Alpha on her lips shattered the last of his restraint. Silas kissed her and the world dissolved. It wasn't like the kiss at the apartment. That had been a question. This was an answer. It was consuming. He kissed her like a man starving, like he needed to breathe her in to survive. His mouth was hot, demanding, devouring every gasp and moan she made. Cleo wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him closer, needing to eliminate every millimeter of space between them. She felt small in his arms, enveloped by his massive strength, yet she had never felt more powerful. She held the king's heart in her hands. He carried her to the master bedroom, not breaking the kiss. He kicked the door open and laid her on the massive bed. The bed he had destroyed the night before, though the mattress was still intact amidst the ruins of the room. He stood over her for a moment, shedding the tattered trench coat. Cleo's breath caught in her throat. He was magnificent. Scars crisscrossed his torso, silver lines that told stories of battles fought and won, but they only added to his beauty. He was pure male power, rippling muscle and golden skin. "You are so beautiful," he whispered, his voice shaking with reverence. "My mate." He joined her on the bed, his weight settling over her like a heavy blanket. But for all his size, for all his monstrous strength, his touch was agonizingly gentle. His large, calloused hands traced the curves of her body as if she were made of fragile glass. "I waited so long," he murmured against her neck, inhaling the wild honeysuckle scent that drove him mad. "I thought I would die of thirst before I could taste you." "I'm here," Cleo whispered, running her hands down his back, feeling the tension in his muscles. "I'm yours." When he finally claimed her, it was an explosion of sensation. It was intense, overwhelming, and primal. There was a fierceness to his lovemaking that should have been frightening, but to Cleo, it felt right. It felt like the storm outside had finally come home. He moved with a rhythm that was ancient, his eyes locked on hers, glowing with that amber light. He wasn't just taking her body, he was binding their souls. Every touch, every kiss was a vow. Mine, mine, mine. The word echoed in her mind, not spoken, but felt. She felt his emotions crash into hers, his loneliness, his fierce protectiveness, his overwhelming love. It was intoxicating. It was too much and not enough all at once. Cleo cried out, arching into him, surrendering completely to the fire that consumed them both. In that moment, there was no boss, no assistant, no monster, no human. There was just them, two halves of the same whole, finally colliding. As the aftershocks faded, Silas collapsed against her, burying his face in the crook of her neck. He was trembling. "I love you," he choked out, the words muffled against her skin. "God, Cleo, I love you." Cleo stroked his damp hair, feeling the steady, powerful beat of his heart against her own. She kissed the top of his head. "I love you too, my wolf." Somewhere in the living room, Barnaby let out a long, loud snore, oblivious to the fact that the hierarchy of the pack had just changed forever. Cleo smiled. She had bought a chew toy for a monster, and in return, she had been given a king. Chapter 21. The Morning After. Waking up next to Silas Thorne was a very different experience than working for him. For one, he took up 90% of the bed. Cleo was practically plastered against his side, her head resting on his chest, listening to the slow, steady rhythm of a heart that beat stronger than any human's. The storm outside had finally passed. Sunlight streamed through the shattered remains of the balcony doors, which Silas had barricaded with a heavy dresser at some point during the night, illuminating the wreckage of the room. It looked like a tornado had hit it, or more accurately, a very passionate alpha werewolf. Cleo shifted, and Silas's arm instantly tightened around her. He didn't wake up, he was already awake. "Don't move," he rumbled, his voice thick with sleep and contentment. "If you move, the reality of the day comes back. I want 5 more minutes of this." Cleo smiled, tracing a silver scar on his pectoral muscle. "We can't hide in bed forever, Silas. It's Christmas morning, technically." "I'm the king," Silas grunted, burying his face in her hair, inhaling the wild honeysuckle scent that was now mixed with his own cedar musk. "I'm the wolf," he corrected, "and right now, my wolf is very satisfied. He doesn't want to leave the den." A scratching sound at the bedroom door interrupted them. It was followed by a pathetic, high-pitched whine. "Barnaby," she sighed. "He probably needs to pee, and he's probably terrified to enter the room because it smells like, well, us." Silas groaned, finally opening his eyes. The amber glow was gone, replaced by a warm golden brown. He looked at Cleo with such intensity that she felt her breath catch. "You realize everything has changed, right?" he said softly, brushing a thumb over her lips. "I marked you. You're my mate. The pack, my enemies, they will know the second they smell you." "I know," Cleo said, feeling a flutter of nervousness. "Does this mean I have to learn how to howl?" Silas chuckled, a deep sound that vibrated through her. "No, it means you have to get used to never being alone again, because I am never letting you out of my sight." He sat up, the sheet falling to his waist, revealing the magnificent expanse of his back. "But first, we have to deal with Vane. He challenged me last night. He won't stop until one of us is dead." Cleo sat up, clutching the sheet to her chest. "Dead? Silas, I thought the police would handle it." "Police don't handle pack business, Cleo," Silas said, standing up and pulling on a pair of sweatpants. He looked lethal and grim. "This is a challenge for the crown, and it ends today." Chapter 22. The Challenge. The confrontation didn't happen in a dark alley. It happened at the office. Silas insisted they go to Thorn Tower. He claimed it was neutral ground, high ground. Cleo suspected he just wanted to be on his own turf. She brought Barnaby because Silas refused to leave the dog alone at the penthouse where he could be a hostage. The lobby of Thorn Enterprises was empty, the security guards mysteriously absent. In their place stood a dozen grim-faced men and women in dark coats, the elders. And in the center of the room stood Vane. He looked smug, despite the bandage on his hand where Silas had slapped him the night before. "Silas," Vane called out, his voice echoing in the marble cavern. "You brought the human. Bold." "She's not just a human, Vane," Silas said, his voice calm but projecting a terrifying authority. He walked Cleo to the side, placing her behind a marble pillar. "Stay here. Hold the beast." Cleo grabbed Barnaby's collar. The dog was currently trembling so hard his teeth were chattering. "You got this, Silas," she whispered, though her own hands were shaking. Silas walked to the center of the room. "You violated the truce, Vane. You attacked me in the city. You threatened my mate." "Your mate is a weakness," Vane spat. "A human queen? It's an abomination. The bloodline must remain pure. I challenge you, Thorn, for the crown, for the pack." The elders murmured. This was ancient law. Silas unbuttoned his cuffs, rolling up his sleeves. He didn't strip. He didn't shift. He just stood there, radiating power. "Accepted. No claws, no teeth. Man to man. Unless you're too cowardly to fight without your fur." Vane sneered. "I don't need the wolf to break you." It was a trap, Cleo realized. Vane thought Silas was exhausted from the mating bond, a period where alphas are notoriously distracted and physically drained. Vane lunged. He was fast, faster than any human. He threw a punch that would have shattered a concrete block. Silas sidestepped it with liquid grace, grabbing Vane's arm and using his own momentum to slam him into the reception desk. Marble cracked. "Is that it?" Silas asked, dusting off his shirt.
I expected more from a usurper. Vane roared, his eyes flashing yellow. He abandoned the man-to-man rule and partially shifted, his claws extending. He slashed at Silas, his chest. Silas didn't dodge. He took the hit. The claws tore through his shirt, drawing blood. Cleo screamed, "Silas!" But Silas didn't flinch. He smiled. It was a cruel, bloody smile. "Now I can kill you without breaking the rules."
Chapter 23. The Alpha's Roar. The fight that followed was brutal. It was a blur of violence that made Cleo nauseous, but she couldn't look away. Silas was a machine. He didn't shift into his wolf form. He didn't need to. He used his human strength with surgical precision. When Vane lunged again, Silas caught him by the throat, lifting him 3 feet off the ground. "You thought because I mated I would be weak?" Silas growled, tightening his grip. "You fool! She doesn't make me weak. She gives me something to fight for." Vane choked, clawing at Silas's arm, kicking wildly. "Release him!" one of the elders shouted. "The fight is won!" Silas ignored them. The rage in his eyes was consuming. He wanted to end this threat permanently. "Silas!" Cleo shouted. She stepped out from behind the pillar. Silas's head snapped toward her. The red haze in his eyes cleared slightly at the sound of her voice and the scent of wild honeysuckle. "Don't kill him," Cleo said, her voice ringing clear in the silent lobby. "He's not worth it. If you kill him, you're just a butcher. Be the king." Silas looked at Vane, whose face was turning purple. He looked back at Cleo. She was holding Barnaby, who had fainted and was lying like a rug at her feet. She looked fierce and beautiful. Silas snarled and threw Vane across the room. Vane slid across the polished floor, crashing into the elevator doors, unconscious. "He lives," Silas announced, his voice booming, "but he is exiled. If he steps foot in Chicago again, I will tear his heart out." He turned to the elders. "Is there anyone else who questions my mate?" The elders looked at Silas, bleeding but unbowed. They looked at Cleo, the human woman who had just commanded the Alpha King to stop a kill. Slowly, one by one, they bowed their heads, baring their necks in submission. "Long live the king," the lead elder murmured. "Long live the queen." Silas walked over to Cleo. He was covered in sweat and blood, his shirt ruined. He looked terrifying. "Are you okay?" he asked, checking her for injuries she couldn't possibly have. "I'm fine," Cleo said, reaching up to wipe a smear of blood from his cheek. "But you really need to stop ruining your shirts. It's coming out of the company budget." Silas laughed, picking her up and spinning her around, right there in the lobby, in front of the elders. "I don't care about the shirts. I won." "We won," Cleo corrected. She looked down at the unconscious dog. "Well, Barnaby helped. He provided moral support." Chapter 24. A Very Alpha Christmas. They returned to the penthouse for a proper Christmas. Silas had called a cleaning crew, specialized, Cleo assumed, in werewolf rampage cleanup, to fix the master bedroom while they were gone. By evening, the apartment was warm, smelling of the expensive pine wreath Silas had ordered and the hot cocoa Cleo was making. They sat on the pristine Italian leather sofa, which Barnaby was currently allowed on, much to the dog's confusion. Silas was bandaged up again, looking relaxed for the first time in days. "I have something for you," Silas said, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "Silas, no," Cleo groaned. "If this is diamond earrings, I'm sending them back. I got you a rubber bone. The exchange rate is unfair." "It's not diamonds," Silas said softly. He opened the box. Inside was a key, an old-fashioned, heavy iron key. "What is this?" Cleo asked. "It's the key to the cabin in the Upper Peninsula. It's my family's ancestral home. It's where I go when I need to be a wolf, where I can run free for miles without walls or buildings. No one goes there but me." He took her hand, pressing the key into her palm. "I want you to come with me next weekend. I want to show you who I really am, Cleo. The wild part, not just the CEO in a suit." Cleo's eyes filled with tears. It was an invitation into his most private sanctum. "I would love that." "Good," Silas smirked. "Now, where is my real present? Because I know you didn't just get me the chew toy." Cleo blushed.
Okay, fine. She reached behind the cushion and pulled out a flat, wrapped package. Silas unwrapped it. It was a framed photograph. It was a candid shot taken at the office Christmas party a year ago, one Cleo had snapped on her phone. Silas was laughing at something, his head thrown back, looking genuinely happy. It was a side of him almost no one saw. I kept this on my desk, Cleo admitted shyly, because it reminded me that the scary alpha boss had a heart. Silas stared at the photo, his throat working. He leaned over and kissed her, a slow, deep kiss that tasted of cocoa and promise. You have my heart, Cleo. You've had it for a long time.
Chapter 25. The Epilogue. 3 months later. Barnaby, sit! The golden retriever looked at Cleo, wagged his tail, and continued to chew on the leg of the dining room table. He doesn't listen to me, Cleo sighed, dropping her head onto the kitchen counter. He lacks discipline, Silas said, walking into the kitchen. He was wearing a suit, ready for work, looking every inch the billionaire king. He looked at the dog. Barnaby. Barnaby froze. He spat out the table leg, he sat, he offered a paw, and he looked at Silas with an expression of pure, unadulterated reverence mixed with terror. Good boy, Silas said, tossing the dog a piece of high-grade steak from the fridge. Barnaby caught it, swallowed it whole, and then, in a move that shocked everyone, trotted over and leaned against Silas's leg. He likes you now, Cleo accused. I think he's a traitor. He realizes you're the top dog. He recognizes hierarchy, Silas smirked, scratching the dog's ears, and he knows who buys the expensive steaks. Silas walked over to Cleo, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. He nuzzled her neck, taking a deep inhale of her scent. Even after 3 months, the smell of wild honeysuckle still made his knees weak and his pupils dilate. Ready for work, Mrs. Thorne? He murmured. Not Mrs. Thorne yet, she reminded him, tapping the engagement ring on her finger. And are you ready to behave? No growling at the interns today. I only growl if they look at you too long, Silas defended. You growled at the printer yesterday. The printer was jamming. It was an act of aggression. Cleo laughed, turning in his arms to face him. He reached into her bag and pulled out a heavy black object. What is that? Silas asked, eyeing it suspiciously. It's a Kong Extreme, made of military-grade rubber used by canine units. The package says it is virtually indestructible. She tossed it to him. Silas caught it. He squeezed it. It didn't break. He looked at it with a challenge in his eyes. Virtually indestructible, he mused, his canines lengthening slightly as a playful growl rumbled in his chest. Don't take it as a dare, Silas, Cleo warned, grabbing her purse. We're going to be late. Silas set the toy down on the counter, pulled her close, and kissed her till her toes curled. Keep the toy for the dog, he whispered against her lips, his eyes glowing with that familiar possessive fire. I told you, Cleo, I don't need rubber to chew on. I still prefer tasting you. And as he swept her out the door, leaving Barnaby to happily gnaw on the new toy, Cleo knew that life with the Alpha King was going to be a lot of things. Dangerous, wild, and chaotic, but it would never, ever be boring. The end.